I've never told anyone this before, but I can't hold it in anymore. Prince called me once, and the last thing he said was about chemtrails. He was frantic, telling me they were watching him, he knew too much, and that they were going to silence him. Just hours later, he was gone. Vanished. I know what happened, and it wasn't a coincidence. They took him. They knew what he knew. But before I can explain how it happened, I need to take you back to that night when everything started to go wrong. This happened in 2016, right around the time the world was still buzzing about Prince's refusal to conform, his growing interest in hidden truths, and the strange things he would say in his private conversations. We all knew he had his eccentricities, but there was always a certain depth to what he said, a certain knowing that he carried in the way he spoke about the world, like he had seen things most of us could never imagine. I was just one of the people who worked behind the scenes, helping keep the chaos of the world from spilling out onto the stage. Sound, lights, logistics. I was there to make sure everything flowed smoothly so the stars could shine. But sometimes, when you're in the shadows, you see things that aren't meant for the public eye. That night, I saw too much. The call came in the early evening, right before things were about to get really busy. His assistant had put me through, and I could tell something was off right away. Prince's voice was different. It wasn't the usual calm, grounded tone he carried. It was frantic, uneasy. It sent a chill through me. "Are you listening?" His voice was shaky, almost too soft. "You gotta hear me out. They're trying to shut me down, you hear me? They know what I know. They know about the chemtrails. They're everywhere." I didn't understand at first. I thought he was just going off on one of his usual rants, the kind of talk that stirred up conspiracies about the government, the media, and the powers that be. But there was something about this call, his urgency, his fear. It didn't feel like one of his usual impromptu rants. It felt real. He kept talking, but I wasn't really hearing his words anymore. I was feeling the intensity of what he was saying, like the room was getting smaller, like his words were sinking into me. "Chemtrails," he said. He believed they were poisoning the skies, creating an atmosphere where we couldn't breathe without being affected. And he wasn't the only one who knew this, he insisted. There were others, powerful people, people we'd never hear about, who were involved in this. He paused for a moment, and I could hear him take a deep breath. "Listen to me," he said. "They're watching me. I can't stay in one place for too long. But if I get this out, if I expose what I know..." The line went dead. It wasn't a typical disconnect. I'd worked enough tech to know that when a call cuts off like that, it wasn't just a glitch. It was intentional. Something was blocking us from continuing the conversation. My phone screen went black for a second. I tried calling back, but the call wouldn't go through. I didn't know what to make of it at first. Maybe I was overthinking it, or maybe he was just paranoid like he'd always been. But there was a gut feeling that gnawed at me. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake it. I tried to go on with my day, brushing it off as just another eccentricity, but the feeling stayed with me. I couldn't focus. I couldn't shake that unease, that strange sense that something had shifted. It wasn't just Prince's words. It was the feeling he left behind, the panic that clung to his voice, like he was about to lose everything. When I finally arrived at the venue later that night, everything felt off. The atmosphere was different, heavy in a way I couldn't explain. As I entered the back hallways of the venue, I felt the air shift. There was a strange stillness, like everyone was just going through the motions, but no one was actually present. Crew members were scurrying around, setting up, checking equipment, but no one was talking to each other. It was as if they all knew something, but no one was saying a word. I glanced over at the security guard near the back exit. He was standing still, his eyes fixed on something down the hall, unblinking, as if he was staring at something that wasn't there. There was a faint smell in the air, like metal, almost like the taste of pennies in the back of your throat. It was overwhelming. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard to ignore the way everyone else seemed to be moving a little too quickly, avoiding eye contact. The strangest thing, though, it was the doorman, the man who usually greeted guests at the entrance. He was standing by the door, but his face, his eyes, looked different, almost empty. The usual friendly expression was gone, replaced by something else, something distant. It was like his face was a mask, and whatever was behind it was hiding. I couldn't explain it, but it made my heart skip a beat. I tried to make light of it, brushing it off, but that unsettling feeling didn't leave. Something was wrong with this place. Something was wrong with everything. And then, as I made my way toward the dressing rooms, I saw it. The door to Prince's room was slightly ajar. It wasn't unusual for him to want privacy before a performance, but there was something about it that felt wrong. The way the light from inside flickered, the way the air seemed too still. I hesitated for a moment, almost too afraid to step closer. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I pushed through the backstage door, the familiar hum of the venue's backstage area hitting me instantly. It was a mixture of hurried footsteps, the clatter of equipment being moved, and the low murmur of technicians making final adjustments. Usually, it was chaos, unpredictable, frantic, yet somehow comforting. It was all part of the performance, the calm before the storm, the feeling of working behind the curtain, knowing the magic happening on the other side of the walls was just an illusion. But tonight, there was a tinge of something else in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Everything looked the same. The walls were lined with posters of past performances, the lighting rigs hanging overhead, casting long shadows across the room. The crew was hustling, but the energy felt muted, like the usual buzz of activity was somehow quieter. People weren't talking to each other like they normally did. The usual backstage chatter was reduced to a hushed murmur, and the usual quick, sharp instructions had a kind of stiffness to them. I didn't think much of it at first. I had a job to do, and so I got straight to it. I adjusted cables, checked the lights, made sure the props were where they needed to be. It was routine, something I'd done 1,000 times before. Still, a feeling of unease lingered at the edge of my consciousness, like I was waiting for something to go wrong. But I pushed it away. Maybe I was just overtired. Or maybe it was the strange call from earlier, the one that still echoed in my mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I passed by the crew members, most of whom seemed preoccupied, barely noticing me. It wasn't unusual. Everyone was focused on their own tasks. The only one who looked up as I walked by was the lighting technician. She gave me a quick nod before returning to her work. There was something in her eyes, though. Something that wasn't quite fear, but it made me hesitate. I almost stopped to ask her if everything was all right, but she didn't seem to want to talk. Her hands were shaking slightly as she adjusted the rig, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder as if she was worried someone was watching her. I looked around again, noticing more of the same. The other crew members were moving in silence, avoiding eye contact, as if they were all trying to pretend that nothing was wrong. And yet, I could sense it. There was an undercurrent of tension that wasn't supposed to be there, a collective nervous energy hanging in the air. I turned the corner to head toward Prince's dressing room, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. I had worked with him before, seen him before he went on stage, and I'd always been struck by how calm he was, even when the pressure was on. But as I got closer to his room, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. The door was slightly ajar, but the air around it felt heavier than it should have. There was no music or noise coming from inside, no voice or conversation like there usually was. The quiet was suffocating. I pushed the door open gently, just enough to peek inside. Everything looked normal. His things were scattered across the small room, his jacket draped over a chair, his guitar leaning against the wall. But something about it felt off. It was too still, too quiet. Prince was sitting on the couch, his back to the door. He was hunched over, his hands gripping the edge of the seat as if he were bracing himself. His head was down and he wasn't moving, not even to acknowledge my presence. I stood there for a moment, uncertain whether to approach. The silence was unnerving, almost suffocating. I took a step closer, my shoes squeaking on the floor, and that's when I saw his face. His expression was unlike anything I had seen before. He wasn't the calm, collected artist I knew. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his face was pale. So pale that it almost looked sickly. His jaw was clenched tightly, and there was a twitch in his muscles like he was fighting against something. For a second, I thought maybe he was just deep in thought, preparing for the show. But then I saw his hands, shaking ever so slightly, gripping the couch like he was trying to hold on to something that wasn't just a piece of furniture. His entire body was stiff, tense, and it wasn't just the body language. It was something deeper, something I couldn't explain. It felt like he wasn't really there, like he was waiting for something. But what? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't saying anything, and I didn't want to disturb him if he was just preparing for the show. But then I noticed something else, something that sent a chill down my spine. The lights above flickered. It wasn't the usual dimming that happened sometimes with the venue's lights. This was different. The flicker was erratic, almost like the power was being cut off and then restored. It was like the lights were fighting against something, struggling to stay on. I looked back at Prince, and I swear, in that split second, I saw something shift in his eyes. His gaze was no longer distant. It was focused. Too focused. But it wasn't directed at me. It wasn't even directed at anything in the room. It was like he was looking at something or someone that I couldn't see. And for a moment, it felt like he wasn't even aware of my presence anymore. I wanted to call out to him, ask if he was okay, but I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat. The room felt colder, and the silence was too heavy to break. It was as if everything was pressing in on me, holding me in place. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I could feel it. The same feeling I had felt earlier, creeping back into my bones. Something was wrong. Something was off. But before I could process it further, the door slammed shut behind me. I jumped, spinning around to see if anyone had followed me into the room, but there was no one. The hallway outside was still empty. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. But that was just the start of everything that would happen. The moments after I saw Prince sitting there, alone in that room, were some of the longest minutes of my life. There was a strange kind of stillness that took over the space. I stood there, staring at him, trying to figure out what was happening. His face had returned to that unnatural calm, but the tension in his body was still there, like an invisible force was holding him captive. I didn't know if I should speak to him, break the silence, but the room felt so thick with something I couldn't describe, so I decided not to. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, and honestly, I didn't want to disturb him further. So I slowly backed out of the room, making sure the door was gently closed behind me. But the second the door clicked shut, the pressure in my chest seemed to ease, just slightly. The air felt less heavy, though the unease didn't leave. It lingered, clinging to the space around me. I thought maybe the whole thing was just pre-performance jitters, some form of anxiety that he was trying to work through in private. People were strange before big events, right? Still, the way he looked at me, those eyes, it was hard to shake the image of him staring through me like I wasn't really there at all. I stood in the hallway trying to clear my head, trying to focus on the task at hand. The crew was still busy, the hum of activity going on all around me. The usual chaos of setting up, adjusting sound and lights. It all seemed normal. Almost too normal. I tried to get back into the groove of things, checking off my mental list of tasks to do. I passed by a few familiar faces. No one seemed to notice anything off. Everyone was focused on their work, but the heaviness in the air was still there. Then I saw him. A guest I didn't recognize, standing near the far end of the hallway. He wasn't a part of the usual crew, not someone I had seen during rehearsals or meetings, but something about him caught my attention. It wasn't his clothes, sharp, dark suit, black tie, nothing unusual about that. What caught me off guard was the way he was looking at me. His gaze wasn't just a passing glance. It wasn't even curiosity. It was too intense. His eyes locked onto mine with such force that I almost stumbled. There was a coldness in his look, like he wasn't seeing me as a person, but just as an object. It wasn't a look of recognition or friendliness. It was as if he was evaluating me, studying me in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to look away, to go back to what I was doing, but it wasn't that easy. He stepped toward me as I moved to pass by him. The air around us seemed to thicken. He wasn't walking quickly or directly. No, he was just moving slowly, almost deliberately, like he was trying to force me to acknowledge him. When he was close enough, he spoke. "You've seen it, haven't you?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was clear, and the question hung in the air. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced, trying to figure out what he was talking about. But before I could say anything, he spoke again. They know. They've always known. It's all connected. The chemtrails, the media, the control. His words were quick, almost too fast to follow, as if they had been rehearsed or forced out of him. I stood there, stunned. He wasn't speaking in some vague conspiratorial way. His words were sharp, direct, as if he was revealing a dark truth that I wasn't ready to hear. My throat tightened, and I felt the weight of his gaze on me. but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I just nodded, unsure of what else to do. Without another word, he turned and walked away. His movements were stiff, his back straight, but his pace was slow, like he had all the time in the world. There was something unsettling about how easily he moved through the crowd without anyone acknowledging him. No one else seemed to even see him. It was as if he were fading into the background, like he wasn't really there. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what just happened. My heartbeat was faster now, and the unease that had been hovering in the back of my mind was now clawing at me. What was that about? Why did he look at me like that? And what did he mean by, "they know"? I glanced back down the hallway, but the man was already gone, disappearing into the crowd, swallowed up by the chaos of the backstage environment. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Was this part of the show? Some performance? But why would he approach me, say something so cryptic? I couldn't make sense of it. I needed to move, to get out of my head. But that's when I noticed something else. One of the dressing room doors, just a few feet away from me, was slightly ajar. The room inside was dark, the lights off. But something about the door itself felt off. It was locked, but the way it was positioned, as if someone had forced it open just a fraction, made my pulse quicken. I couldn't explain why, but I had the feeling I needed to go in there. I tried to push the thought away, but the door seemed to call to me. I shouldn't have cared. It wasn't my job, and it certainly wasn't something I should have been involved in. But there I was, standing in front of the door, my hand hovering near the handle, my heart pounding harder with each passing second. Before I could reach for the door, I heard someone behind me. I turned quickly, startled, but it was just one of the stage hands. He didn't look at me, though. He just walked past like he didn't even see me standing there. But as he passed, I noticed something odd in the way he was moving. His pace was quick, almost frantic, and his eyes were darting around like he was trying to make sure no one was watching him. I stood there, watching him go, a sick feeling in my stomach. I hadn't seen him act like this before. I turned back to the door. I don't know why, but something inside me needed to open it. Something was pulling me toward it. But just as I stepped forward, the door slammed shut on its own. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze. I couldn't explain it. The air around me felt thick again, like the pressure was building. Something was watching. Something was waiting. But that was just the beginning. The air backstage felt thicker as the night wore on, like the pressure had been cranked up just a little too much. I tried to shake off the unease that had settled into my bones, but it was impossible. Everywhere I looked, I saw signs that something was wrong. Crews acting a little off, the lights flickering more than usual, and people whispering as if afraid to say too much. The backstage buzz that normally hummed with excitement and energy was now replaced with hushed tones, quick glances, and a palpable sense of anxiety. By this time, I was trying to focus on getting things done, but it was hard to ignore what was going on around me. Billie had finished her set, but the energy backstage had only grown more intense. The air felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. But what? I couldn't figure it out. I walked past the dressing rooms, taking one last look down the hall to see if I could find anything I might have missed. That's when I noticed it again. The same door I had seen earlier. the one I had been so drawn to. This time, it was wide open. At first, I thought maybe someone had gone in there, or maybe it was just another part of the usual chaos. But as I stepped closer, something in my gut twisted, warning me to stay away. I shouldn't be here. This room wasn't supposed to be open. It wasn't on my list of areas to check, but something kept pulling me toward it, like a force I couldn't resist. I looked around to make sure no one was watching me, then took a hesitant step toward the door. The moment my hand touched the frame, a shiver ran through me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I glanced over my shoulder, my heart hammering in my chest. No one seemed to notice me. No one was paying attention. I pushed the door open slightly and peeked inside, expecting to find a dark room filled with props or equipment. But there was nothing in there. It was completely empty, completely still. Just the kind of quiet that makes your heart beat a little faster. That's when I heard it. A soft, unmistakable sound, a voice whispering. It was coming from the far corner of the room, barely audible. I froze. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel the air growing colder, heavier, as if the room itself was closing in around me. The whispering stopped, but the silence that followed was just as suffocating. It felt wrong, like there was something just out of reach. Something I couldn't see but could feel pressing in on me. My mind raced, and for a second, I thought I might have imagined it, but the sound had been real. I stepped inside, my breath shallow, every instinct in me screaming to turn around and leave. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was already in too deep. As I looked around the empty room, I noticed something odd. A faint glow was coming from under the farthest corner of the room, just beyond the shadows where the light didn't reach. I walked closer, my feet unsteady. The closer I got, the stronger the pull, like the room was trying to draw me in. The light, it wasn't a natural light. It was a cold, unnatural glow flickering like a dying flame. Not from any source I could identify. It wasn't a bulb. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. And that's when I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the light. A shadow, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it. It was watching me. I could feel its presence creeping over me, surrounding me, as though it were waiting for me to acknowledge it. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot, trapped in the room with whatever was standing just in front of me. It wasn't real. I had to be imagining it. But the air was colder now, sharper, biting at my skin. My legs felt heavy, like the very air around me was thickening, becoming more difficult to move through. The figure moved. No, it didn't move. It was more like it shifted, like it wasn't confined to the rules of space. It was no longer just standing there. It was in front of me, closer, the darkness seeming to expand with every blink of my eyes. I tried to scream. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, constricted with fear. Then for a split second, it wasn't a shadow anymore. The figure shifted, and I saw its eyes. Dark, empty, void-like eyes staring straight into mine. No emotion, no feeling, just empty. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Gone as if it had never been there at all. The room was empty again, as if nothing had ever happened. couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My hands were shaking, my whole body trembling with a cold sweat. I turned to run, but as I did, I noticed something else, something I hadn't seen before. The door had closed behind me, and I had no idea how it had happened. I grabbed the handle and yanked it open, my heart racing in my chest. The hallway outside was completely still. No one had seen me. No one had noticed the door shutting behind me. I stumbled back into the main part of the building, gasping for air, trying to get my bearings. I couldn't make sense of what had just happened. Was it real? Was it a trick of the light? Or was there something else? Something other moving in the shadows? Something I wasn't meant to see? But there was no time to dwell on that. I had to keep moving. Something told me that whatever I just witnessed wasn't the end. Then came the real shock. I didn't know what to do with myself after that. I should have left. I should have run, screamed, told someone, but I couldn't move. Every part of my body was frozen, like I was trapped in a nightmare, too terrified to wake up. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. What had I just seen? That thing, that presence, what was it? And why was it so intent on showing itself to me? I tried to push the thoughts away, to ignore the icy grip of fear that had taken hold of me, but it wasn't easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the darkness, the black, empty eyes of that thing staring into me, watching me. I walked back to the main hall, moving through the backstage area like I was on autopilot. My movements felt sluggish, like my body was moving slower than usual, but the dread that had followed me, that oppressive weight, didn't leave. It clung to me, thickening the air around me. I passed crew members along the way, but none of them met my eyes. The usual chatter that would have filled the space was replaced by a heavy, unsettling silence. They all seemed to be moving in fast forward, as if they were doing their jobs without really being present. Their faces were blank, and it was as if I was invisible, like no one could see me at all. But they saw me. I tried to shake it off. I had a job to do. I had to focus. But with every passing minute, that feeling deepened. Something was off. The whole atmosphere felt off, like the walls were closing in, like I was suffocating from the inside out. Then, as I walked past the hallway near the backstage area, I heard it. A voice whispering, soft, like it was coming from just around the corner. But there was no one there. I froze mid-step. The voice was familiar. I couldn't place it, but I knew I had heard it before. It sounded like the figure I had seen earlier, that thing in the dressing room. I turned the corner, my heart in my throat. There was no one there. Nothing but an empty hallway, dimly lit by the flickering lights above. I stood there for a moment, straining my ears, but the whispering stopped. I was just imagining things. I had to be. The pressure from earlier, the strange events, it was all starting to get to me. But then I heard it again. This time, it was louder, clearer. The voice was speaking to me, but it wasn't in words anymore. It was in feelings. I could feel the emotions pouring out of it, like the whispers were entering my very soul. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breath. I didn't know if I was hearing this out of fear, or if something was actually speaking to me, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. My skin was crawling. I had to leave. I had to get out of here, away from whatever was going on in this place. I turned quickly, intent on leaving the building, when I saw it. The figure was back. The same one, standing at the far end of the hallway. Its form was darker than the shadows around it, like it was made from the darkness itself. I tried to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat, trapped by the cold grip that had taken over my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was as if the very air had been sucked out of the room, leaving nothing but an unnatural silence that settled deep in my chest. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. And for a moment, I wondered if it was the same creature I had seen in the dressing room. Was it the same presence that had taken over Billy? Was it the thing that had taken over her mind, her body? But this time, there was something new. The figure's eyes, they weren't empty anymore. They looked at me, locked onto me, and for the first time, I saw them move. Slowly, deliberately, they began to change, to shift. The blackness of its eyes began to ripple like oil on water, swirling and warping. It wasn't human. It couldn't have been. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what this thing was, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to let me leave. The floor beneath me felt unstable, like the very ground was shifting. My legs gave way, and I collapsed to the floor. I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. Every muscle was frozen. I tried to scream again, but nothing came out. The presence in front of me, whatever it was closing in. I could feel its weight pushing against me, suffocating me with every passing second. Then the whispers came back, only this time, they weren't distant. They were in my mind. Not words, but commands, like a thought trying to push its way in. You should have stayed away. You shouldn't have seen this. You should have kept your distance. I felt something press against my chest, a weight so heavy that I thought I might suffocate. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind until I couldn't think. I couldn't fight it. I was trapped in the presence of this thing that wasn't just controlling the space, it was controlling me. My thoughts, my breath, everything. The air grew colder, colder than it had been before. The whispering stopped. The figure's eyes locked onto mine. And for a moment, I thought I saw something behind the eyes, something ancient, something that had been waiting to break free for a long, long time. It spoke to me without words. This is just the beginning. And that's when everything changed. The moment that figure disappeared, everything went completely silent. The screams in my head, the fear coursing through my veins, the weight pressing against my chest, all of it just stopped. The air, which had been thick and suffocating, suddenly felt empty. And I don't mean that in any abstract sense. I mean the air itself left, as if the entire world had been drained of its substance. For a split second, I thought I was floating in nothingness, suspended between the real world and something else. I don't know how long I was there, standing frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly that it seemed to drown out everything else. My legs were shaking, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My breath came in shallow gasps, as though I'd forgotten how to breathe altogether. I should have moved, should have run, but I couldn't. I couldn't even think, couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The horror of it all was too much to bear. But as I stood there, my mind trying to process what I had just seen, something else happened. Something that snapped me back into reality, or at least what I thought was reality. I heard footsteps, Not the usual scuffling of crew members getting ready for the next part of the show, but the deliberate, slow steps of someone or something approaching me. My heart stopped. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I could feel it. That weight, that suffocating pressure in the air. It was back. But when I turned, expecting to see that shadowy figure again, there was nothing. No one. The hallway was empty. Quiet, except for the growing sound of my own frantic heartbeat in my ears. I must have imagined it. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe the fear had finally overtaken me. But then, I heard it again. The footsteps, louder now, almost thundering as they echoed down the hall. I turned in a panic, expecting to see something emerging from the shadows, but the hallway remained still. Too still. My breath came faster, and I realized something so obvious I almost wanted to laugh at myself for not noticing it earlier. I wasn't hearing footsteps at all. I was hearing voices, faint whispers, just beyond my reach, just out of sight. It was like the walls themselves were speaking, like the building was alive, breathing with some malevolent presence that had been lurking in the corners of the room, waiting for me to finally hear it. My chest tightened. This wasn't some isolated incident. This wasn't some trick of the mind. This thing, whatever it was in control. It was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I wanted to run. My body screamed at me to flee, to escape whatever horror was chasing me, but my legs didn't obey. My body remained rooted to the spot, as if I were tied to the floor by invisible chains. I could feel the temperature drop even further, the chill wrapping around my skin like icy tendrils. It was suffocating, but more than that, it was familiar. I couldn't help it. I had to move. I had to know what was happening. I staggered forward, my legs weak and unsteady, fighting against my own fear. I pushed past the dressing room doors and into the main hall. Everything was chaotic, as usual. Crew members were rushing around, adjusting lights, prepping for the next act. But they didn't seem to notice me. They didn't acknowledge me at all. They were all moving with such purpose, but there was something off in the way they walked, like they were following orders from someone or something that wasn't there. My gaze flicked around, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was all wrong. The scene was too familiar, but something was fundamentally different. I felt like I had stepped into a parallel universe, where everything was the same, but nothing was quite right. I tried to focus. I needed to find someone who could explain this. Someone who could reassure me that I wasn't losing my mind. I spotted one of the stagehands near the back, and I rushed over to him. "Hey," I said, my voice coming out too shakily for my liking. Have you seen anything? Anything strange tonight? Anyone acting weird?" He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw recognition in his eyes. But then, his gaze went blank, distant, as though I had just asked a question that didn't matter. "Everything's fine," he said, almost too quickly, before turning away and walking off without another word. His posture was rigid, his movements stiff and mechanical. It hit me then. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even human. I turned away, a sense of dread growing in my stomach. If I couldn't rely on anyone else, I would have to figure this out myself. But the further I walked, the more I realized that I didn't have much time. The whispers were getting louder, the air was thicker. The building was alive with a presence I couldn't see, but I could feel it in my bones. I rushed to the nearest exit, hoping to get some fresh air, some distance from whatever was happening. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. I turned the handle and tugged, but it was locked. I pulled harder, but the door refused to budge. It felt like the whole building was closing in on me, pushing me back into the chaos, into the waiting. "Let me out," I screamed, pounding against the door. But no one came. No one even turned to look. I sank to the floor, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I tried to breathe, tried to collect myself, but I couldn't. The air was so thick now that I could hardly see. My vision was blurry, my head spinning. I could feel something closing in on me, suffocating me with its presence. And then I saw it. Through the glass window in the door, I saw a figure approaching. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall, its limbs stretching in ways they shouldn't have been able to. It had the same hollow eyes as the figure I'd seen earlier, and its movements were jerky, almost broken, like it didn't belong in this world. I knew in that moment that it was coming for me. Whatever it was, whatever had taken over Billy, and whatever had been lurking in the shadows, it was coming for me next. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I thought I could escape it, but it's still here. I can feel it lingering just beyond my reach. It's not just a memory, it's alive. Every shadow, every whisper, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye. I know it's watching me. I should have never gone back there. I should have never stepped into that room. But now, it's too late. Whatever was in that room, it's not finished with me. And if I disappear, you'll know why.